In the works with Brandon and Usa.
Hello, Usa.
Hello, Brandon.
All right. What do we got today?
So we're pretty much just going over the last guest podcast with Drew Wright.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure to watch that for more context on what we're talking about.
Yeah, we're pretty much just going over the podcast, going in a little deeper on maybe stuff that was mentioned or maybe we thought that was interesting. It's not a rehashing of every single thing we talked about in the podcast, because some things we talked extensively enough on and you don't really need to dive too much deeper, and I'm not going to say the same points over again. So
did you want me to scoot over a little bit?
No, you're good.
I have like two boxes of
you're all right. But anyway, that's what it's going to be, and we're just going to kind of talk through things. I know I have things timestamped, so I'll kind of go in order. I don't think Usa doesn't. So he'll interject because I went over kind of the stuff he had and it overlaps. So when I mentioned it, he'll pop in, and I mean that's fine. Let's go to the beginning. If you have not watched that podcast, go watch it. I think it was pretty good.
Episode 57.
Yeah, because the last one was 58, and that was Brogan's annotation.
Yeah.
So pretty much we're doing now, but for our guest Brogan.
So episode 57, something with Drew, right?
Yeah.
I just remember there were 3
psychology,
things.
law, and freedom or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So check him out.
Oh, that's funny because those are the points that I got.
Great. Yeah, exactly. You have it all written down. I will say, okay, so first thing I want to start off with is just when after that podcast was done, so it was like a week or two later, and I was visiting my mom, and she was like, or no, she saw me at work, and she was like, hey, I saw your podcast. I'm like, what? No way. I'm like, on what? And she's like, Spotify. And I'm like, oh, nice. And I know she doesn't exactly listen to the podcast. She was just like, I always mean to like check out your podcast when it pops up, but time, and she's a busy woman. So yeah. And so I guess on the weekend she just saw it and was like, I have time. I'm just going to click it and listen. And it was Drew's podcast. Yeah. And she was like, wow, I was really impressed by you guys and the guest as well. Just like, oh man, all these young individuals talking about like literature and like ideas and these things. And she's like, it was pretty well done. I could see people actually listening to it. And I was like, oh man, thanks, Mom. She was like, yeah, your guest was very interesting, very well spoken. It was good to hear from somebody of your generation.
Yeah, shout out to Mama Nardi.
Yeah. No, not Mama. It's Thompson.
Yeah. Mama Thompson.
Don't make that awkward.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. Yeah, shout out to my mother. Thank you. That was very encouraging. And I mean, it's to hear from somebody in the professional world that she really enjoyed that and could see people watching it. That made me confident in like, hey, maybe we're doing something here. And she enjoyed it. She said it was like, since you don't hear a lot from our generation, it's almost like a voice from our generation, which there are probably plenty of podcasts like that out there, but it's nice to offer more perspective on people of our generation. So going into the actual interview itself, we usually do recently, we have our guests do a quote when they come in, something profound, meaningful to them. And Drew actually chose the To Be or Not to Be soliloquy from Hamlet. And it's kind of funny. He talks about it at the end of the podcast too, but he never read Hamlet, but he memorized that one at one point in time. He didn't do it for memorization in the podcast, but at one point in time, he had read it so much and it was so meaningful to him, he had memorized it. And just a little bit on the background of the soliloquy and maybe why it was important to Drew and kind of why it had an effect on him and why it's just a really good, profound excerpt from literature in general. Like that's something I found everyone just, it's like, wow, it's a really good thing. Mm-hmm. It's from the play Hamlet that was written by William Shakespeare. And at this moment in time, Hamlet is contemplating suicide, and he questions if he should continue with, all the calamities of life and all the suffering, or should he just die? Because to him, that seemed like a so much easier solution to literally every problem he has. Like, why do anything? I could just die. It's a better solution. And to end his suffering. But what is after death is unknown. And that was enough to keep him from suicide. And he realizes that's why anybody puts up with life and struggle, is because we don't know what happens after death. We don't know what's going to happen when we die. So, we hold on to our lives and deal with all the BS and all the suffering and things like that. And that kind of produced the line toward the end. Thus conscience does make cowards of us all. So he's pretty much like, man, this is making me weak. Like, I'm a coward because, I don't know what's out there.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to deal with all this BS now. So because I don't know what happens afterward. And, that's kind of profound. And, I could see later in the podcast, we talk about struggles, and Drew kind of talks about his struggles in like high school and his depression and things like that, and trying to climb out of that, and just rough family situations, where it just wasn't a great time for the family. And it just seems like there's a lot of calamity going on, and there's a lot of just, in a way you could say suffering. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but one could say suffering in that point. And I'm not saying he ever contemplated anything, but it's serious. Like, why deal with anything when you can have another route, right? It's like, well, you really don't know. And it's, when you look at this, it's kind of a very serious thing, because it kind of dips into that nihilistic thought of, hey, nothing really matters. Why do this? But it kind of, out of fear, you end up going, okay, well, I'll deal with it. Let's do this. I don't know what happens after. And that's true. Nobody comes back from the dead, so we don't know what's up. So that's kind of, I don't know. What do you think about that? You're like, yeah, sounds about right.
Honestly, I have no thoughts on that.
I don't know. I just thought, when I looked more into it, because I read Hamlet in high school, but I didn't really kind of, like, I got the story, but it's one of those things, I guess the language and the fact that I was younger, I didn't really catch a lot of the raw seriousness.
I wish I could have more input on this, but as a student in high school, I did not care about the deeper meaning in literature.
Yeah, me neither. At least in stuff we had to read at school. And so it was kind of interesting, because you have the to be or not to be, and you could kind of guess that.
Every single class I almost failed because I did not want to do the work.
Hey, I get that.
So I have no knowledge in that aspect.
No, it's fine. I don't have much either, but just on that topic itself of, to be or not to be, and what was said. Hold on, I need to sneeze. Not really. Okay.
False alarm.
That was an accident. Yeah. Okay. And so we kind of move along, and he talked about how he's in school and he's doing a degree, psychology, and wants to be a lawyer, dealing with more of the constitutional side of things, like rights. And I was like, okay, why psychology if he's trying to be a lawyer? But later he was talking about how he kind of wanted like options, because he loves psychology, and he wanted to be able to get into that if, maybe being a lawyer wasn't quite what he wanted to do with his life. Like he mentioned just some grueling tasks that a lawyer might do, and maybe that's not what he wants to do. Or 80-hour work weeks is something I mentioned, and it's like, yeah, I could see that. And you had some stuff kind of along that line of psychology and kind of rights, because I didn't touch too much on that, but you had
I thought it was really interesting that he wanted to do law and psychology. And I was just looking online and seeing how those two can even like mesh together.
It seems like it might mesh. Like, okay.
It does a little bit.
Yeah, because mostly I hear people who are going to be a lawyer, they're like, I had an English major, because, you got to know English very well.
Yeah. So what I found online was that the legal teachings shape how society follows the law, while the psychology aspect influences how the justice is done. So they kind of play off of each other, but not really. So like an example of that is like a psychologist can help with civil cases like motor vehicle accidents, and they can have their input to help with that,
Like in what way?
whatever trial. Just really explaining like how the mind works, because
Like why a person would do what they did?
definitely, because you know how some people can plead, or not plead, but get like, what is it? Oh my gosh.
Like traumatized?
Insanity. Like they're
plea
like,
insanity or something?
plea insanity. Yeah. So it's pretty
So
much
we could
just
go into that a little bit.
It goes more into that, but
I could also see when kind of, and I have no idea about lawyers or law, so if I say something completely wrong about it, then that might be the case. But I could see how maybe it's like knowing how people behave, you could kind of explain things in a courtroom or try to sway a jury opinion. Like, hey, this is what was going on. This is what was going through his head. His actions were justified. I mean, human beings, we're not machines, things like that. Like maybe you could argue in that manner. But maybe it does coincide with some law, like psychology. Why do we have certain laws? And it might help explain with psychology or better understand. I'm not sure.
yeah, because like
It seems like it would connect, but maybe not in a rock solid way.
it's not like
It's not like
purely
English,
direct.
like, okay, your ability to read this document is gonna affect your
it's
work.
a little bit indirect, because even with psychology, that's kind of knowing how people work,
Yeah.
and why people do things, why people do the things that they do, and a lot of rules or laws are kind of based around
Based on
that.
how people work.
Yeah, so indirectly it does play a part.
And I kind of think of the phrase like, this is why we don't have nice things, because I don't know, because people do certain things. And I mean, there are laws, there's kind of safety laws. There's a reason why child toys aren't, some of them are banned.
Yeah.
Because, hey, as a parent, you would, maybe you like, so like tiny things that could be swallowed by a child. Some some toys are banned like that. And it's because somebody may just leave it out. They may be a very good parent, but accidentally, leave the toy out, or they don't think, oh shoot, the baby's gonna swallow it. Maybe they've never been parents before. Maybe they've never been around kids.
Yeah, it's just
so it's not that the parent was a terrible parent. It's just, they're not going to think about it, and the baby's going to swallow it. So kind of that's how I'm thinking of it with psychology, like like human function. Maybe the way I can almost think how like road signs work. There are a reason why there are signs and do not enter signs. Sometimes it's not always obvious what to do, and I don't know exactly how to say that, but
I
kind of get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
But yeah,
Yikes.
so that with Drew's interest, that was kind of the only thing I could think about. Just
That was a little.
kind of using it in court, like the way you
Yeah.
explained, just why they do.
I mean, because
things.
they do bring psychologists in, or at least from the trials I've seen. But
Yeah, they do. They do.
yeah,
But yes, there's that, and then let's see.
and I guess it just helps to know context and know what you're.
Yeah, because what
doing.
we touched a little bit on was the moral psychology, and that's it helps resolve disputes over punishments and promotes fairness in the legal system.
Gotcha. So I
Yeah.
guess that can. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
But you
then
didn't have
just-
much on that.
No, not
Psychology
really.
or
Just
constitutional rights. Because that's another thing. I thought you had something about like rights or freedom of speech or something.
I mean, yeah, it's it's further down.
Yeah. Yeah, you could talk about that, because I don't think I hit legal stuff again. but I know he mentioned that because, yeah. Well, he does. I mentioned something later about political stuff. You could say that if you want.
Oh.
I don't care. All right. I guess. So further down the line, he talks about how he was the third of 4 boys.
Yeah.
Now, I was similar. It wasn't 4 boys. I had older sister, brother, then me, and younger brother. So it's kind of interesting. Like, I can relate to that because a lot of times the brothers, like siblings, are spaced kind of evenly and similarly to other families. And, I'm not exactly, it doesn't line up. I'm not his age and he's not mine. But I mean, just growing up with brothers with that sort of spacing of ages, and I can really relate to where he's coming from with a lot of like positioning in the family and what it's like to be like the younger middle child and things like that. And what kind of effect? Because I know I should have kind of delved into this a little more, but I think sibling like birth order has an effect on how people grow up, like being raised. And I guess that goes into some psychology too, but
yeah,
I forget exactly how it's supposed to.
Have you ever seen like the whole how parents treat their children in regards of when they were born? Like the first child would have all these expectations on them.
Yeah,
the middle
first
child.
Yeah,
if there was
and
a
the
middle
youngest,
child,
it's like we don't care, bro.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's what I think of.
I do think that's interesting because like the first child, of course, that is the first child they've ever had. So they're trying to like do it right. We want to do this right. They're going to get more attention just in the fact that there aren't more kids. They are the only babies. So they'll get more attention growing up, just specifically from the parents. And then of course that kind of tapers depending on the spacing, of course, because I mean, I've heard it where, hey, your older brother is 10 years older than you. And then you were practically raised an only child because by the time you were, like he was 18, you were 8 years old and he was already out of the house. So, I mean, it's birth order is interesting, but I can definitely relate to his position. I can see some familiarity from that. And then here's something you also had on yours, that he moved around a lot. And I was like, what kind of effects does that have on kids? And does it really have an effect? Because he was moving like every 6 months to a year is what he said for lots of his like young childhood. So I know you had some stuff on that.
Yeah. So Drew pretty much was just like, hey, it doesn't bother me.
He's like, I don't remember it.
I don't remember.
I was like, okay, even if you don't remember it, how much does it affect, And,
So,
and I asked like, hey, how did your brothers feel about the whole thing? And he's like, oh, I never asked my brothers that. I'm like, gotcha. No insight.
I guess that wouldn't be a question that popped in my head to ask.
Like, hey, what was it like? I don't know. I've asked that before. Yeah, but it's not exactly like a question you ask a lot.
Yeah.
And maybe like once in a very long time.
I feel like you'd really have to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, I, looking online, I did see that it did have a big impact, and there's research that's saying that, it can be tough on kids' mental health, but there are other research that says the children who do move to new places have more chances to learn, like just more learning opportunities. And it's found that moving helps kids learn about different places as well. So it's just kind of,
that makes sense.
Getting out there in the world, just exploring everything. Yeah. And just,
you're going to run into differences of things.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, hey, this is school, but it's different from the other way.
And there's a big one where moving just to a better neighborhood, because I actually know some people who don't quite live in a great neighborhood, and moving really helps just change the atmosphere and environment of everything and just improve everything. So that's definitely a big major win. But for Drew,
if you can't go outside, that's gonna
who knows what Drew's living conditions were.
Yeah, I mean, he said he didn't really remember,
So-
but I thought it was interesting about, how it affects them.
But yeah, kids are really moving really well. Just
Yeah.
like
I guess
you even
as
said,
long as
Drew,
you're just like with your parents or
yeah,
something.
just like okay.
And when you're young enough, I guess you're not so deeply attached to things,
Yeah. So
is what it seems
yeah,
like.
another thing that I saw online was children that just migrate, home to home, different houses, whatever. It creates for them. Their sense of the word home isn't so much as physical anymore. It's more as, hey, I have this connection. This connection is home.
It's where your
instead.
family is.
Yeah.
And,
So I thought that was really cool. I never really thought about that.
yeah. And I don't know, humans were nomadic for the longest time. And you would set up for a couple days, maybe a week, and then you'd move. And hey, maybe you had the same shelter that you would set up, or maybe you didn't. Maybe you just traveled and found shelters elsewhere, because some people weren't nomadic in the what you would think of as a nomadic tribe. Some people just went place to place without shelter, just city to city, town to town. But families did that, and that's where a lot of human nature and culture came out of. So it doesn't seem like it would be a terrible thing for a child. I just think if there's instability within, you say, the new version of home, so your family, if there's instability there, that's where I feel like moving could be terrible, because then it's like, hey, this family unit's unstable, so you're seeking stability maybe in your environment, and then you're ripped out of your environment. That's what I could kind of see as being bad. But
Yeah.
other than that, I kind of see moving around, like you get better perspective, you get more perspectives.
Yeah. It's
And awareness of perspectives is a fantastic thing. Even
the thing
for a
is
young
with
kid.
these research papers,
Yeah.
it makes me think these are based off of adults. Even if they were children who did go through that, as adults they think differently.
Yeah, like how did this affect you? Because I remember, like, oh man, like being a child was so great, and all this time period was fantastic. And then I really think about it, I'm like, was it really? Or am I just thinking it was?
Because for me,
Because I have more context now.
yeah, for me, it's the idea of just the social interaction. And if you're living somewhere for maybe like 3 years, and this is like your prime development,
Yeah.
between, I want to say about like 4 and 7-ish,
I don't know
Around?
enough about that.
but you're still a child.
Yeah.
You are making all these friends in 3 years. Even like on year 1, you still are friends with them. That's 3 years of friendship right there.
Oh, like are you talking about if you were uprooted from an established place?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
If you have a circle of friends that you really enjoy and really
I
trust.
almost feel at that age, though, it's not as significant. Like you might get more emotional about things, but I don't feel it's like a deep sense of loss. I feel like as a kid, you're like, okay, on to the next thing. And you might be like, man, I miss my friend. But
I can see that.
you'll just keep going. And later you'll be like, oh, dang, when you're older. Because I think when you're older, like if you were friends with somebody for 3 years and then you rip, that's kind of harder to be like, damn, like I don't have that friend anymore. And friends when you're older, aren't as readily available, at least good friends.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And as a kid, how deep is your friendship, and how are you connected? It could be just like, hey, we play cars all the time, and it was 3 years of playing cars. You never really, I mean, I guess it's like that's what you consider a friend at the time, and it could be sad that you don't get to play cars with that person anymore. But
Okay, well, let's go ahead and just like fast forward a little bit. So like Drew is college.
yeah,
But let's say he moved around a lot, middle school and high school as well.
I feel like that.
Do you think that would play a bigger part? Because there's a saying that people say is you make your lifetime friends in college or something like that.
Yeah, that's because you kind of figure out who you are, and you also are more intentional about friendships.
Mhm.
Whereas before it's just like, who's next to you, and that's your friend. But then when they start making bad decisions, or maybe you guys just don't agree on things, then you might be like, oh yeah, you're still kind of an acquaintance, but you just don't chill with them anymore.
Okay, so that being said, just lifetime friendships are made in college.
Yeah.
Would you say that middle school and high school don't really matter, or?
Not exactly, because I remember it's if the friendship started in middle school and kind of went that long, then it's like a real, like it's practically family type friendship, right? Like I've known you since before, before your forebrain was developed. Yeah. But like I'm thinking now, most of my friends in middle school, and I guess even high school, if I see them, I'd be like, hey. Sometimes I don't, because I don't want to talk, but because they were more of an acquaintance, I just know who they are. But it's just like, hey, but I didn't have any true, real connections. I maybe had a couple, but even so, like time has passed and things are different, and different life paths. I don't dislike them or anything, but I just don't really talk to them. And
I get you.
people who I can consider close friends now are different from high school friends. So I don't know.
No, I completely understand.
Like I met you in high school or after. It was kind of like tail end and then after.
It was tail end.
Yeah, but I met you at work and not high school.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that was kind of a better placement. I don't know. All right, so our camera shut off, so we're going to try to figure out where we were. I think we were talking about friends in the middle school and high school and kind of the difference there.
So pretty much we said at what the ages 4 to 7,
yeah,
friendship wasn't super important. Or I mean,
no, it's fine. We don't have to go too much into it, but we just thought like, okay, friendship for life, friends for life, typically they say happens in college. You mentioned that. And so, when you're a kid, it may not be the biggest deal that things change, you know? And, most of your friendships, like I was talking about how in high school, I don't really talk to a lot of people I went to high school with, and not for any terrible reason. It's just drifted apart. I didn't have a solid core group in high school. So I didn't really worry about that stuff. I know my brother still talks to some of his high school friends because he had a group in high school and they were close. So he talks to them still, but he doesn't, they visit every once in a while, but it's not like he's chilling with them every weekend or something. So I feel like you can make friends in middle school that translate to high school, that translate to college. But I don't know. I think if you're uprooted when you're really young, it's not the worst. It's not the worst. Although if you've been in a very particular place for a long time and then you move, that might be a little different. But if it's, as long as your family situation is generally stable, a year to 6 months, you maybe don't get too close with people. But once you settle down, you'll make friends.
I see.
I'm not sure.
Well, I don't know why, but in like the summary I pretty much just had with so many sources, ridiculous. It went into parental role and saying that parents have a big say in how, oh my gosh, I can't even, I'm just going to read it. Parents have a big say in how moving affects kids.
Well, yeah. If that's what they know, that's their anchor, that's their home, your parents, and how you go about doing that.
Well, and then it goes into some parents use effective practices that either allow or limit their kids' movements.
What movements as in?
So this is kind of going into how the parents act around the child.
Oh, yeah.
So like how they express their emotions, how they set boundaries, and how they provide support.
Maybe how they deal with moving all the time.
And then just having like restrictions and like other aspects.
I mean, that makes sense because that's their home. You know, that's the people they're around. So, I mean, if you didn't parent well and you moved around a lot, things wouldn't go well. Just as I feel like if you were home, like in a solid place for a while and you didn't parent well, then things wouldn't go as well either. I don't know, but I could kind of see. I mean, I can see how parents play a huge role.
I still don't completely understand the restricting movements part. Like in
Yeah,
what
like you can't go out or something. Do they mean by that? Do they mean that?
that's the part that didn't really
Yeah,
make sense to me.
I kind of
But,
get the gist of it though.
setting boundaries, having set
Boundaries.
emotions, that sort of stuff makes sense to me
Boundary.
because you're teaching them that stuff.
Yeah, I gotcha. All right, so that was kind of what we had on that. Now, another thing you had was public school versus private school. So Drew was, or not private school, homeschool. Drew was homeschooled except for between 2nd and 5th grade. His high school was like an online program thing. So he just did it at home, I think is what he was saying. But yeah, so he was in public school from 2nd to 5th, which is, I think, around what you were talking about with like key development.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he was saying that, you know, he generally had a positive public school experience. So what, I know you had stuff on public versus homeschooling. So if you want to kind of dig into that a little bit.
Well, so, I mean, there's not a lot to dig into.
I mean, that's fine.
It's definitely a lot of arguments on both sides. I have read articles by like, was it Muslimat and Ismail? They're just people who just kind of get into it and they support homeschooling. It can lead to less stress, higher test scores, better social development. Surprise, social development. So I thought that was just like, wow, okay, that totally.
Is that for homeschool?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think it's it's how you do it. Because I hear like homeschooling killed me. I was behind everybody. I have no social capabilities.
Yeah.
But I also hear like homeschooling's great. I had a fantastic childhood. I'm, ahead of my class.
So you can still definitely get not everything public school can give you, but generally the same amount of at least interaction with people.
It's just done differently.
Yeah.
I believe.
So just higher test scores and just overall,
I definitely think it's very method heavy. Kind of like how when you were saying when moving around, it definitely depended on parents. Yeah. I think with homeschooling, it depends on parents and also maybe what other programs they're doing.
Yeah, I feel like it, because of his homeschooling and how, research says that homeschooled children have higher test scores. I feel like this is one of the reasons why Drew did so well and had a label of gifted on him and all these
that's the thing I was going to go into next. But I mean, something I've heard is homeschooling wise, some individuals were like, oh man, I never got to do sports. I never got to do this. And others are like, yeah, my child or I did sports. It was different. I didn't have a public school team, or their public school had like an option to like augment into that. Mm-hmm. I forget how that works, but they did do sports and they had all that experience with that.
Do they just join like little leagues
like clubs?
Outside?
I think there's like
just
clubs because I know with soccer, I mean, there's club sports.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
I think homeschoolers also, if there's enough of them, I think they come together and do things too. But I don't know.
A homeschooling community.
There are those. There's stuff like
kids.
co-ops where it's like, okay, you're good at this subject, or it's to spread the.
Yeah, I see.
So multiple people aren't. So one person isn't carrying the burden of all the subjects.
Yeah, it's just like
especially when you get
specializes
the older,
more.
Yeah, like hey, this is your math teacher. It's a parent or somebody who does do homeschooling type things.
Okay.
And so all these homeschoolers go to class, which it's not exactly the same, but I mean it's kind of like that. So you're socializing with other homeschoolers and you're in class doing work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not the same as 8 hours a day, but maybe it is for some people.
Yeah.
I don't know. I got a couple more homeschooled friends. Maybe I could talk to them.
Okay.
Why are all my friends homeschooled?
I don't know. Anyway,
Oh yeah, do you have more on homeschool versus
just a
public?
little bit.
Okay,
just a little
go
bit.
ahead.
So, another article I read from this man Feynman just argues that it will just isolate the kids and limit education. But we know, just from our discussion,
It can.
It can. But if it's done right,
Yeah.
it's done right.
Yeah.
So I can see his argument.
Because I mean, one thing about public school is you are getting interactions with the populace all the time, especially if you're not like a small town. Then you're getting a swath of the populace. But that's also another downside is you're getting a swath of the populace, man. Yeah. You want your kids to know about drugs. Like I learned about all that stuff from public school, all the terrible things, I should say. And I mean, it was just everybody knew it.
Yeah. So another person says Halleck, also article, mentions issues like the lack of standard curriculum. How do you feel about that?
Again, it could be done right or done wrong.
How do homeschooled people keep track of that? Do you know?
So I don't know exactly. I know some people follow like programs, like online programs. Other people do like co-ops. I don't exactly know if there's a particular standard or tests. Maybe it's like, hey, you're gonna be given this test. Your child's gonna be given this test, and you have to go take the test somewhere. Prepare them for the test.
Some kind of benchmark test just to see if they're up to par?
I mean, I know there was map testing in elementary school.
Yeah, I hated that.
I wonder, do homeschooled children still have to follow that? I think there is some sort of thing like that.
I definitely feel like there's a legal process of like registering your child.
Or maybe it's high school stuff. Like, hey, you just gotta be able to do this. But yeah, legally there is, because it's like, illegal to not have your kid in school.
My child is homeschooled. I'm gonna teach them.
Yeah, because I have heard stories of people homeschooling their child, but not really they just didn't want them in public school. They put them to work instead, and so they have like a 8th grader's education, and that's that, you know. And they had to learn things later on, and college was, a struggle. But I've also heard, kid like, hey, Brogan was in college. He was doing college, before he's like 15 or 16, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It can go well. I think with homeschooling, you might have more control on what the day looks like and the specific material.
Internal temperature high.
Oh.
That's never happened before.
All right, so our camera died again, but I was pretty much talking about, it was homeschool.
Yes, homeschool.
Yeah. But yeah, I think I was saying that you have more control in the classroom, but if you don't have the resources, materials, whatever to teach, then of course your child will suffer, So that's where public school, I mean, most people, I guess, graduate, right?
Yeah, most people.
Yeah, so they get something. I don't know. I don't know statistics on public school, but I think most people graduate and you have a baseline of education. Mm-hmm. You can read and write, right? Hopefully.
Right.
That's how it's supposed to go. I know it doesn't always happen. Same thing with homeschool. So I want to go to, you had some stuff on this, that Drew was actually considered, a gifted student. And I mean, he had strong opinions on that, though, about, gifted programs and expectations, especially being put on a 4th grader. So I said, such as like, hey, you're supposed to be as smart as a 6th grader. And like, how would they feel if they're not living up to that, And it's like, you are supposed to be that gifted child. And it's kind of like dooming them with expectations is things he mentioned. He also mentioned he didn't really know like whether it was bad or kind of a good thing, but he just knew kind of from experience, a lot of the gifted children, and I've seen this too with other people who were putting gifted programs, is expectations were just put on them. And then later in life, high school, college, when things get difficult and maybe they're not doing things with ease anymore, they get really anxious and they start to kind of spiral a little bit. It becomes a problem. And just for context, Drew, they offered for him to go from 3rd to 6th grade. So that's kind of a big jump, in my opinion. Like I never was offered to skip grades or anything, but even just one, I heard like kids skipping 1 grade, but that's like 2 grades, 4th and 5th grade, and you go straight to middle school.
It's wild.
Throwing an elementary schooler in with the middle schoolers. Oh, jeez, that's rough. And I guess his mother didn't want him to miss out on a lot of his childhood, and didn't want to rush that, so she didn't put him. She didn't make him skip grades and such, which I think probably is a good move, because
I think so.
You don't want to rush kids to adulthood, man. That's, I don't know. Or maybe it's not a good move. Maybe it should have been done. I don't really know, because I think, again, some kids would flourish from that, getting done with school, and they still have like their teen years. I'm not sure. What are your thoughts on that?
I think even if their front lobe is not developed, you should have a conversation with them
and talk to them about it.
Explain to them, hey, this is 3 years of your life. You're only this age.
But would they understand that? I don't know.
Well, that's why you just need to set aside a good amount of time, just so you have time to explain and articulate what you really mean and make sure they really understand. Yeah. Because, hey, if you jump 3 grades, that's 3 years. They're, children's 3 years older.
You'll be a 13-year-old in like classrooms with 16-year-olds.
Like people in their teens, they do tend to bully. They do tend to do
Part
this.
Part of me thinks it's homeschool. If you're homeschooling and you skip grades.
Oh, homeschooling and skipping grades? That's different.
Yeah. I feel like that would be a positive thing. I almost feel like just knowing what I know about public school.
No, if it was public school.
Dude, small kid, man. The small kid, the young kid.
You will get picked on.
Like, hey, you'll have friends. People will respect you. But you'll also get heavily bullied too.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. And maybe you're there because you're smart as hell and you'll be able to navigate that. But it's also rough. It's also rough.
I definitely think having a sit down with your child and explaining everything, as long as even if it takes a long time, just making sure that they understand and letting them have the decision, because at that point it's on them.
Yeah. I don't know. That's kind of a tough thing. Would you have your kids skip grades? I almost feel like you could have them skip grades in elementary school.
Well, okay. Hold on.
Middle school.
Question.
Middle school and high school.
If they were able to skip grades, can they go back?
Can they go back? I don't know.
I feel like they should be able to.
Or can they wait? Like, can you skip grades, get your 5th grade education, then have like...
It turned off again.
Fuck. Okay, camera died again. But,
technical difficulties, thank you.
But we were saying that, like, can you go back? If you can skip grades, can you go back? And maybe you can.
Because I feel like that would be ideal.
Maybe you could take some gap grades.
Yeah, if that kid wants to go ahead and jump 3 grades, they can. And if they don't like it, they can just be like, hey, I want to go back to my regular life, my normal life.
Yeah.
And then just go back. I feel like that'd be ideal.
It would. I don't know. It's hard to really know, especially since, like, I went through public school for my entire life. I don't know how it would be different. You could only guess. You could only try to follow research. But until say you raise a child in a particular manner, or you say go back and live it yourself, like you just won't know. Did you have more on that?
I do not.
Okay, that's fine. All right, so in public school, I mean, he considered ADHD. He had to take meds and things, and he was very interested in books, and he would read so many books, and so much so that they would have to take his books away during lunch so he would eat. And it kind of it's unfortunate that, you know, he had to be in that position. But also, I think very interesting how focused he was on reading. And I feel like that helped him develop who he is now, and maybe articulation and imagination. And because after that, he was talking about books he read. And I think this is fast forward. He read one by William Wilberforce. I forget what book he was talking about, but it was pretty much about abolition in Britain and like slavery and such.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought this was interesting. I had no idea who William Wilberforce was, so I kind of looked him up. So he was actually born on August 24th of 1759 in Kingston upon Hull, England. And he came from a wealthy family, and so he kind of, in his youth, he was kind of drinking and gambling. So that messing around, I guess.
Okay.
Came from money, messing around in England.
Came from money.
Yeah. At 21, he decided he wanted to become, you know, he wanted to go into office, and so he became a member of the British Parliament. And you're like, okay, the dude pretty much messing around, and then he wants to go into government. Whatever, you know, you don't think it's a significant thing.
Yep.
Maybe he was just trying to prove himself. Maybe it was all pride, you know, young man dream, you know. But when he was about 24 in 1785, he read a book, or I don't know what else you would call it, a passage. No, what do they call those? A essay, something like that. A book or an essay. And I didn't do too much research into it itself. But he read Rise and Progress of Religion in the Soul by Philip Doddridge. And I guess that had such an impact on him that he became a Christian, cleaned up his life, and dedicated his life to God, and like reformed based on his Christian ethics. So he did a 180 after reading this. He pretty much did a 180.
He's like, maybe not.
He was like, yeah, drinking, gambling. Now he's like, I'm a Christian, and now I'm going to dedicate my life to this and the ethics of this. And in 1787, I guess in a journal, he wrote that God gave him the objective of suppressing the slave trade in Britain and such, or I guess in general. So
it's that person.
Yes,
Okay.
that's who he was talking about, the book that we
Okay.
were talking about, and kind of got us on the topic of slavery and such. And so he was like, okay, God told me to try to suppress slave trade, you know, try to get that done. And I guess in 1807, when he was about 48 years old, he pushed a bill that ended the slave trade with the French colonies. And so he kind of ended some slave trade. And then he died on July 29th, 1833. So about 74 years old. But that was just 3 days after the slavery abolition got passed in Parliament. Slavery Abolition Act. Yeah, got passed in Parliament, pretty much saying, hey, no slavery, free the slaves, stuff like that. So Drew was just talking about how, you know, that guy really pushed anti-slavery kind of in Britain, which was kind of the first place, I think, at that time where that was happening.
Yeah.
I mean, that was...
That's wild that he just did a 180 and then he just like caused this ginormous thing.
You know what? We're get rid of slavery there. And I thought that was fantastic.
That's
and you think the
crazy.
Civil War was many years later, 1833, that was like 30 years later, 27 years later.
Yeah, just imagine having your like everything you thought was right just
And
turned
then now
upside down and then just creating some kind of like revelation.
Yeah, and I was very surprised, but also not, because I've heard this a lot through history. I was surprised how much Christianity influenced his life, like William's life. And I wonder, you know, what exactly did that book speak about in relation to Christianity and faith in the soul that so profoundly changed him that he was like, I'm flipping. And then later being like, all right, we're going, you know, we're just gonna, this is what my life is for. This is my purpose. And I think that was very interesting, very profound, because I don't see that level of conviction often
Yeah.
nowadays, but I hear it in history that people like this, where they're like, they do a 180 and then now just their life is dedicated to something. I'm definitely sure there are stories out there but I don't hear them too often, which I would like to hear them more often. But I thought that was just fascinating.
That is.
And then you kind of talked about the ethics of AI and stuff like that. And I don't want to talk a whole lot about it, but
I wasn't expecting you to get into that.
okay, because I'm like, that's a can of worms I don't know much about, and it's so new. It's easy to say wrong things, and everyone gets up in arms about it, and I just don't want to say stupid stuff on things about things I don't know. But then we talked about like when he was a kid, and I was like, hey, what are some things that you were proud of when you were a kid? And he was saying that, you know, he was kind of a dependable individual in the sense that, you know, he would take action. So when his dog got hit by a car, or when his brother almost drowned, even as a child, even though he wasn't maybe able to directly do something, he was able to support or take action, like go get his father or console his mother, you know, things like that. Like he was there, he was doing things. And, you know, I could see how those events influence him now. Like you could see it when he speaks in his actions of like how he carries himself. He wants to be that dependable person. So I found that kind of fascinating. And then later he kind of describes, this is like 30 minutes into the other podcast. We've been talking a lot. Yeah. He Drew struggled with depression and the fact that he was, you know, secluded and generally on his own to deal with it. I mean, because it was during the time of family struggle. So he went deeper down into depression because he was failing a hard class. It was difficult class, new teacher, you know, but he mentioned, you know, he was supposed to be he was a gifted student. He was the gifted student.
Yeah.
And man, he's failing this class and he has to ask his mother for help with things. And his mother has to write emails for him. And like it's apologizing. And he just said there was a lot of shame and guilt. And there was trauma in high school that also led to the depression. But also being isolated from social interaction outside of his family, that was causing an issue. So isolation, we were talking about homeschooling. I guess in this case, this is where that isolation was happening. Like for him, there was an isolation and, you know, he was just cut off and it was not a good time. And every single person in the family was going through something different. Like he mentioned, like some family members were either passed away or needed taken care of. And like, his brother was sick for a while. Like everybody in the family was going through something. I'm like, damn, like it's not like, hey, we're going through this together. It was each person is getting hit with something different.
And we all have to support each other.
Yeah. And so he was saying that was just a rough time. And it would be difficult to to be stable and grow during that. You're like in survival mode. You know, you're just trying to last. You're just trying to get to the next day, and you're not really growing anywhere. You're not really looking toward the future too much. You're really just like trying to be okay. And that is what he described to me. That kind of period of his life was through high school, and and there was really a turning point after high school. Maybe did he say like about a year after high school?
I think about a year, yeah.
But it was incremental. It wasn't all at once. So the turning point, and that's kind of what I wrote down here. The turning point for Drew was after high school. He needed a job. He just wanted some money, so he was door dashing. And he mentioned that was his nihilism job. Like, you know, go to work, do this, do that, go through the motions. You know, he would get money and then eat his way through it, is what he said. And so he was just going, and it wasn't really much. And I was
at least he was going.
I mean, at least he was doing something. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that trying to fight things with going through the motions is difficult. But at least it's somewhere that's not in turmoil. You know, maybe he's suffering, but it's not, you're not going down. You're just kind of staying.
For me, have you, Andrew. Andrew, he was on the podcast.
Oh yeah, another podcast guest from a while ago.
Gathering my thoughts. Okay. Whenever we worked together, and then I just kind of quit all my jobs, all 3 jobs, and didn't really have anything. And our podcast was still like kind of here and there.
Yeah.
He described me as a person who just stopped. I just completely stopped, and I was incredibly depressed because of it. And I didn't have a direction to go. I was just there. I just existed, and
it was bad. It's a rough place to be, because I felt that way coming out of high school. You know, I had a particular route I was going to go in high school, and then they changed the prereqs for the class, and it messed up my schedule, and I took pretty much all classes that I didn't really want to take, except for like maybe 1 or 2, which subbed in that were great. But it was all classes that I was just like, damn, nothing that I wanted. And I just wasn't motivated. And that carried over after high school into college. And I was working at the place you were, but it felt like this. It felt like the nihilism job. It felt like the day in, day out. And in school, I was like, why am I in school? And, I could do good in school, but I just wasn't doing great unless I was specifically interested in that class, which for me, that never happened. I was always doing decent in high school. I was able to just listen, maybe take notes and not study too much, and I'd get it. I'd get A's or B's. And senior year changed that for me. And it kind of became a habit to just, if you're supposed to be a smart kid and people are like, you have so much potential, and then you don't. You just feel like, what am I doing? And you just, again, nihilism job. And not saying the whole time I was like depressed or anything. There were great moments. But it's just, you don't feel like you have a direction. And I can definitely relate to what he's saying there. And, but it switches. It's slowly, incrementally. He gets a job for a local politician. It's a campaign job. It's a really small town. I forget what he was, or not necessarily town, but small election, really small. But yeah, he was just talking about how, he just made t-shirts and signs and things. And
you said it was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. And I was like, okay, how did this affect his decision to become more involved in politics? Maybe because it was one of the like better things to come out of things. I don't know if he was interested in politics before, but if that's something he really enjoyed to do, and really enjoyed doing, and that related to politics.
In my head, if he, like we said, he clearly enjoyed it a lot. So I'm thinking, what if he just enjoyed the viewpoints of whoever he was supporting?
Maybe.
And then
just kind of went into politics with it. And I don't know. That's something we didn't ask. He could have been interested far before.
Definitely.
I don't want to put words in his mouth. But another job he got was political canvassing, which is pretty much knock on doors saying, hey, will you vote for my guy? And for him, he said it helped him practice socializing. And like he talked about history teacher that he'd knock on the door and he'd have hour-long conversations. And
vote for my guy?
Yeah, vote for my guy.
Wasn't it a female running?
Maybe, I don't know, separate thing. It was a different.
That was a separate thing?
I think it was a different thing.
Oh,
different political job. Yeah.
What?
I don't know, but I think that's what I heard.
Okay. I totally missed that then.
But yeah, so that was another job, and so he kind of was really out there knocking on doors, talking to people, and it said it was really good, and he started to go to therapy, but I don't think he mentioned what he did with therapy and how it helped him. But pretty much what I heard and what he said was he started doing positive things incrementally. Like he started doing music, and then he realized, okay, maybe I should go to college. That probably be a good thing. Which I'm like, yes, another step. And he was listening to hours and hours of Jordan Peterson, which I think he's a clinical psychologist. I don't know if he's still licensed. There's controversy surrounding him, but generally he's got a good message. And he was listening to him for years, but he didn't do anything. He was just taking in the information and then not following it. But then he started taking that advice, taking advice of getting responsibility, of taking ownership of yourself and things like that, and having a clean room. And, understanding what he went through before, having a clean room was like a milestone, because it was like, I have my shit together after all this stuff happening in your life. And then when he was talking to me and he was like, yeah, I got my room cleaned. And to me, I wanted to mention that again in this podcast, because that, I mean, that's a marker. That's something you could put in your cookie jar, if you know what that is. Like, things you could store away. Like, hey, I have a clean room now. Like, it wasn't like that before. And the clean room doesn't just represent like items. It represents my life. Like, things are okay. Like, I'm okay and I'm able to go forward. And I think that was really cool, hearing that. And positive things. Like, he really started to gain momentum, and being in much better positions, you know, in a much better state of mind, he really began to kind of do good things. And
just real quick, I just want to apologize that and to our video watchers, like, if I look distracted, it's because I kind of am.
Oh yeah, I know you got some family stuff.
Are just in, and it's just a lot, and I just want to apologize.
It's no problem. I got so much information here. No, it's not that much. It goes quickly toward the end because it's very similar stuff. So I'm not concerned. But I was just thinking how much a positive effect friend groups have, because he mentioned the friend group that we were going into. I don't want to talk too much about that. I've talked about that a bunch.
Yeah, just kind of like how it was formed. And
yeah, I've talked about that before. But how much of a positive effect, like, especially if you were used to isolation before, how great it is to have people to share life with, people who care about you and that you can care about, and people who foster growth and ideas, you know, and just camaraderie. So if you have generally a positive group, it's gonna build you up better and faster than if you were just all alone. And I feel like this just added to his momentum. And you know, now he mentioned he was getting an acting job. He's got the acting job. He got the acting job. And he'll be in a play or a musical or something else he mentioned. So he'll actually be in that stuff. And again, that's really cool.
I only heard of one show.
Yeah. And there was another one where they were going to be like animals or something, and we joked about furries, and he was like, no, stuff like that.
Oh.
And yeah.
Okay.
So he talked about his schedule too, and I found it interesting because he was talking about just scheduling today and like tomorrow, and then having an accountability calendar. Like, did I actually do these things?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just so good because he's playing to what he knows about himself. You know, if it's too far out, he's not going to care. But today and tomorrow, and then did I actually do what I needed to do?
Yeah.
It keeps him on track. So I thought that was cool.
That is.
Yeah, and I also felt like Drew...
Wait, hold on, sorry. I kind of want to track back onto the 2 calendar thing. Ever since he said that...
Have you been doing that?
I haven't have like a physical count. I do have one physical calendar. But
I do too.
I've
I have
also
a joint
been
calendar.
using 2 separate apps on my phone.
Really?
One is called Structurize, and pretty much I just block out all my time just so I can kind of see how it looks and just make sure like I do those things.
Yeah.
And then I would have, you know, my separate calendar for like bigger things, like just important dates and
stuff that happens way into the future.
Yeah. So on my physical calendar, I am pretty much going ahead and doing more habit like stuff.
Yeah.
On my phone, I'm doing like structurized where it's playing out my days.
These are the things I need to do today.
Yes. And then I'm also using my reminder app.
Are you finding a lot of benefit like from this stuff?
Oh yeah, for sure. Because I would just look on my phone. It's like, oh, I still have to do that. Oh, this is what I need to do next, because it's a widget on my phone. So whenever I open it, it's just there.
Yeah.
I only have one page.
Gotcha.
So it's just there, and I'm just like, oh, okay, cool. I gotta do this.
Nice.
So it's been helpful.
That's kind of great. that
Yeah.
you
So
got
I
that.
was just like, oh wow, that's a good idea. Just having multiple things, just to like, you know, save your ass on stuff.
Yeah. And so kind of from here, I didn't touch on a lot of things he mentioned. It was more like analyzation. Like, I like how Drew, it seemed like now he's really riding the wave of opportunity. When doors open, he's going through them. He's like now seeking to move forward and chugging along as things change, and it's different from what he's used to, and you could tell he's loving it. Like he seemed, even just in the year I've known him, like he seems so much happier and like he's getting out and doing things. Also, he mentioned Animorphs. I looked that up. Kids acquire a new morph, like animals, to solve problems of that day, and they're battling like a secret alien infiltration. And I even looked up the video.
That's interesting.
You flip the corner.
Oh yeah, see, that's the only thing I remember.
Yeah, I saw literally a YouTube video, and it was like a dude a silhouette slowly transforming into a silhouette of a salamander, and I was like, nice.
That was the only part of the book I quote read.
Yeah. So I just thought that was funny. I went and looked that up. When asked what drives him, he spoke initially that it was fear of failure, and I was wondering if maybe that's from expectations of being a gifted student. You know, maybe that's where that's from. Maybe just in general, because I feel like everyone's been there, but maybe that's specifically what happened. I'm not sure. But then he said now he's kind of switching to the mindset of running towards something. So it's almost like a flip-flop of what he was talking about in Hamlet. It's like, man, I'm scared of death, so I'll deal with all this stuff. Now he's like, it's not so much the fear of failure, and I'm kind of like jumping reasoning. It's not an exact analogy, but instead of the fear of failure, now he has a goal in life. There's a reason he's doing stuff, and it doesn't have to do with I'm scared, Yeah,
he just has like a reason to go forward.
Yeah, and he mentioned our previous guest, Brogan, because he's a friend as well. Brogan's ability to just do things, and Drew kind of realized that, oh my gosh, you can do that, And I was thinking, how many things do we leave on the table because we only thought about it, and that was enough to subdue our appetite for action, And how can we switch to like a good mixture of action-based thought, Because oftentimes you'll think about something and it's like you're doing it in your head, and then you're satisfied. You don't care anymore. And then you just do something else or nothing at all. And you end up not doing much and not kind of chasing your interests. And so that's something that, I've heard some stuff like that. People talk about that. But thinking about it now, the don't think. It's not that you don't use your mind. It's like you don't replay it in your head to where you think you've done it.
Yeah.
You do it, and of course you use reason and logic, and you think about it, but you do it. Don't get so hyped up on it. Proceed to do the action. And I also wanted to give a Brogan update. So he's still training for the 24-hour run. I guess the guy who's running the group hasn't really talked much on the group. Don't know. Okay. He got a bed in his van, loft style, so he can push stuff under it. Yeah. He's doing projects in the woods. He's still taking a class or two. He also mentioned that he's more inspired to do projects now that he has more free time.
Nice.
And he thought, I forget exactly what the difference was. He thought since it's like more time, you'll be able to do more. But no, it's since you're doing less, like you want to do something.
Yeah.
So I forget exactly how he phrased it, but so he's enjoying himself. So
and the less you have, the more you have.
Yeah. Yeah. But I just kind of want to conclude with what I enjoyed about speaking with Drew. So I wrote, Drew is focused on becoming himself. He engages opportunity. He utilizes past struggles as strength for the future, and he cares deeply for the people around him. That's kind of things I got from that, and just from knowing him. And so it was a real pleasure to talk to him like that and kind of get a story, because being in conversation, I've heard like this or that, but never like the full kind of the lineup, and to really see where he is and how he is now. I really enjoy seeing that with people, like their story, their come up, because it really explains them now, and it makes them more beautiful as a person to see where they've come from, even if maybe it's not so much struggle, but if you could connect who they are now with what they were, their past, things like that, who they were as a child. There's so much more context, and I feel like it's more pure, it's more true.
Yeah.
So I enjoy hearing people's past like that. So anything you had wanted to add there?
I mean, it's pretty much what you said, just him pretty much just being able to verbalize all of his past just hardships. There you go, past hardships, and then just being able to move on from that, and not even moving on from that, it's taking it with him.
Yeah. Utilizing what you've learned.
Like he's turning what happened to him into a newfound strength type of thing.
Like it was definitely it was a trial, and he learned stuff from it.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about future stuff. I didn't really comment too much on that. But if you want to check that out, just watch the podcast. I mean,
episode 57 something like
and that.
Something with
oh shit,
Drew
the
Wright.
camera's off. Okay, you ready?
Okay, so this time our camera did not die.
It was just full.
Yeah, it was full.
I'll just reiterate this last part because it may have cut out right in it. So what I enjoyed about speaking with Drew, Drew is focused on becoming himself. He engages opportunity. He utilizes past struggles as strength for the future, and he cares deeply for the people around him. And I think that just accurately kind of represents who he is. And, I'm not sure if I said this before it cut out, but I just absolutely love hearing people's story, the context of their life, and understanding, where they came from and how they came to be who they are now. And it's just, it makes the person more beautiful in my eyes. You could, the beauty of their story and their character. And even sometimes with rough stories, it's really cool to see how people transform, how people change, but how they also stay the same. Mm-hmm. So yeah. Any thoughts?
I was just saying that I enjoy Drew and how he pretty much takes his past and his hardships and taking it, and he moves on from it. But not only does he move on from it, he takes it with him, and then that kind of becomes his strength and motivation.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I enjoyed.
Yeah. It's really cool. It was really cool talking to him. You don't always get to hear the whole kind of like up until present life story of your friend. You usually hear it in clips, but yeah, it was really nice, and I enjoyed the conversation, and I think you guys would too, so go watch it.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I mean, that's really all we got. I mean, just I guess you could say the couple words you always say.
Remember to comment, like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button, rate us on Spotify, 5 stars, high five, thank you, and remember to comment on our please. YouTube videos.
Yeah, comment on YouTube video. Even if you're on Spotify, just hit up YouTube and put just a comment
with
on
us.
There. Yeah,
just chat with us.
I enjoy seeing the comments, and I just want you to say like what you kind of got out of Drew's podcast and what you found was interesting, and just kind of your reaction to it all.
And for all the shy people out there who don't like to, have their username or name on videos, sooner or later there will be an email.
There will be an email?
There will be an email for ideas.
Oh, I didn't.
Idea submissions.
Man, you didn't tell me.
We've been planning this for forever ago. But yeah, just so we can get like more ideas and stuff.
School's in session, man.
It is. There is a lot going on.
Yeah. But yeah, I really like hearing from people and seeing their comment. I'm definitely not going to judge you or anything.
Suggestions.
Yeah.
Those are nice.
Yeah. So just leave something and I'll try to respond. So far, I've been able to respond to every comment. Nice. The one, maybe two that's down there. Sometimes none. So just, leave some more and I'll respond to them. But
yeah, that's it.
That's pretty much it. All right. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
It's going to be fun editing
We're going to stitch
this.
that together. We couldn't even tell where we left off. So, all right. Well, without further ado, farewell, guys.
Bye.
Thank you for watching In the Works. Subscribe and like for more.
Damn it, there's so much. There are 5 clips now.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.